Reza Pahlavi is the exiled former crown prince of Iran and also emerging as a key figure as Iran finds itself in a leadership vacuum.
The aid that the President of the United States promised to the brave people of Iran has now arrived. The noble people of Iran, despite the savage repression and massacres of this regime, stood firm with courage for nearly 2 months. I now ask you to exercise the utmost caution to preserve the lives of civilians and my compatriots.
But is he the right person to take over in Iran? Let's bring in E.J. Kimball, the Director of Policy of the U.S.-Israel Education Association. So that's the first question, E.J. Is Reza Pahlavi the guy?
Well, thanks for having me on. That is a great question. He could be one of the guys. And I say that because, while he's certainly got the profile of someone to take over and run this country, we have to remember he hasn't been there in over 4 decades. And while he may be projecting on the outside of the country, what is still unclear is how much support he has inside the country. Let's not forget, he's not in the country dealing with this regime, this brutal regime, destroying assets, going after the people in the country. So will they look to him and rally around him? We're already seeing groups on the ground trying to assert power there. And there's so many different interest groups right now in Iran that it's not clear how this is going to shake out. But I think it is very important to understand here, while we may not know how the days, weeks, months, and maybe even years ahead will play out with who's going to take over, it is very clear that having this regime out makes the entire region safer for the future.
There are so many layers to the Iranian military, the IRGC, the Revolutionary Guard Corps, being just one of them. It would seem that there is still an awful lot of, a military chain of command in place that could make things awfully difficult for the people there.
That's very true. And look, the Iranians planned for this, especially after Operation Midnight Hammer. They were expecting an attack. Now, maybe they weren't quite expecting what happened, but they put things in place to be able to preserve the regime going forward, even after decapitation of the top levels of it. And I think we need to be very aware that this regime, in an act of desperation, has already shown that it's willing to slaughter its own people, and that they could carry out even larger slaughters on their people. I would hope and anticipate that there has been support given to people within Iran, maybe through the Mossad, through the CIA, through others, so that they can be equipped to counter the IRGC and those that are enforcing these rules. And as President Trump has called upon the IRGC, local police, to lay down their weapons, to join in and become part of the solution here, I'm cautiously optimistic that enough will heed that warning from President Trump and actually join with the people so that there can be a somewhat smooth transition. But President Trump has been clear that this is not about the United States going in, taking over Iran, installing new leadership and owning the future of Iran. This is about the people. President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu have provided an opportunity for the people of Iran to rise up and take back control of their country. And that's what we need to be watching for in the days ahead.
Well, I hope that they will do that, but that's a tall order, especially when so many thousands of them have recently been slaughtered in the streets by their own government. I'm old enough to remember what happened in 1979 when a bunch of so-called students overthrew the Shah. Do you think there is the strength among the people to set up a new government, to stand up a new government, and to get rid of this theocracy that so many of them seem to hate?
I do, and we've seen the resolve of the people in Iran, that they've been able to withstand the brutal assaults that this regime, not just since January, but for the last decade or 2 decades when they've had uprisings and they've just the brutal crackdowns on them. The people there are willing to seize control. The problem is they don't have the power to do it. And now President Trump is providing that opportunity by weakening this regime that the people may be able to now take over.
All right. We thank you very much, E.J. Kimball. We appreciate your insights today. Thank you.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.